Welcome, my friends. I am coming in with this applause. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I just couldn't help but to welcome everyone with this great applause. Yes. On the 1st of April, 4 humans were strapped in a space shuttle and they flew to the moon. Yes, they did. They went up to the moon. They did not just go to the moon and touch that part of the moon that has been touched before. These 4 humans, including a woman, that's why I'm applauding today. Come on, guys. Yeah. Including a woman, went to the moon, to that part of the moon that no one else has been before. The back of the moon. Yes, it took them 10 days on this exploration, and they went on the moon and saw what has never been seen before. Awesome. It was amazing. This was a win for everyone. It is. It still remains a win. These 4 heroes took on that journey to go up to the moon and discover the back part of the moon that no one has been before. And they saw craters and different things, collected samples to come back to the Earth. And they came back to the Earth. On the 10th of April, they landed on Mother Earth. Yes, it was awesome. It was beautiful to watch. It was. Now, today, I'm so excited, yes, but we are going to be looking at a few things that these astronauts were able to navigate and maneuver. And as usual on this podcast, we are all concerned about behaviors. So we are going to be looking at those behaviors that these astronauts actually utilized to help them through that journey. Of course, they had science and technology backing them. Without those things, they wouldn't have made it. However, there were behaviors that those astronauts were thoughts that they learned, that they were trained in, that they were skilled at, that actually made this mission possible. Come with me. Those are those behavioral traits that we are going to be unboxing. By the way, where's my hat? Did I tell you I also went with these astronauts? And look at my jacket, and I have my hats. This is the one that we wear when we are just lounging and parading. So today, my friends, we are going to be talking about those behaviors that these astronauts were able to pull off. And it's not a big secret. No one is going to tell you, except me. Yeah, no one is going to tell you. So welcome on board. I'm your host, Edna, a behavioral analyst and specialist. We are going to be unboxing those behavioral traits that these 4 astronauts were able to pull off so their mission was accomplished. The very first thing, let's not waste time. The very first thing is trust. Trust. Those astronauts trusted one another. They trusted in their process. They trusted in their training. They trusted in their skills. They trusted in their abilities. They trusted in their capabilities. They trusted in their strengths. They did. Those were some of the things that these astronauts used to pull off this excellent and we can say perfect mission. They did. Another thing that these astronauts used was they stayed calm under pressure. And this skill or behavior in particular is a dialectical behavioral therapy. This is talking about your ability to tolerate distress. These astronauts were able to tolerate distress in different forms. Imagine that these 4 full-grown adults packed in a small capsule, and each one was doing its own thing. And remember, there was no gravity, so they could not just stand and hold their ground and be on their feet. The tendency to float was there. So I could just decide to float and bump into someone, and that could upset that person. That could trigger something. But all of the things that were going on, and besides the mission in front of them, they had to also pay attention to what was going on. And so there were times that their distress levels were really off the roof of that shuttle, but they stayed put. Now, what were some of those things they did to help them tolerate distress? Pause. Pause. We have talked about pause before. Taking short, deep breaths and even long, deep breaths before you react, before you say something, before you respond. Also thinking about the consequences of your actions. So before they did anything, they were thinking, is this the right thing for me to do? Let me pause and think about it. And they were all trained in their different capacities. They are, but they needed to have that ability to tolerate distress, because things will be happening here and there. Imagine the time that they went off, no communication to the Earth Space Center. They were off for, was it 40 seconds or 40 minutes? That alone is distress triggering. But they continued. Anything could happen. And the Space Center on Earth cannot reach them or tell them what to do. They cannot also go back and report. There were times like that everything, communication just went blank. That was really distressing, but they stayed put. So please stay with me. We are going to uncover these different behaviors that actually took these astronauts to the moon, around, and back to Mother Earth. Another thing that happened with these astronauts that I'm going to tell you today is that they rewired their thoughts. And how did they rewire their thoughts? Now, we are coming into the cognitive behavioral therapy aspect of things. This is where they kind of challenged some negative thoughts that they would have had, reframed some thoughts so that they kind of think more positive, They challenged some of those negative thoughts that would have been there, that could have been prevalent with each of them. So they took their time to reframe their cognition when things were not going the way they want. Now look at it. They are in space. It's not here on Earth that you will say, okay, I have a problem, I can call this, I can call that. They were just there alone. Even if they had the backing of the Space Center here on Earth, they were just by themselves there. So they had to find a way to problem solve. And one of those things they used, one of those behaviors they used was to cognitively reframe their thoughts. So when they had this blockage or barrier or limitations or problems, they had to reframe. Look, we have to solve this problem here. We have to find a way out of this so that we can finish what we are here for and go back to our loved ones. So cognitive reframing is a core cognitive behavioral therapy skill that these astronauts used. Now, the fourth thing that these astronauts did, which is part of the behavior we are uncovering here, is they had clear roles and boundaries. Their roles were clearly defined. There was no room for assumptions because we're talking about making sure their mission was accomplished with high precision. And so each of them, those 4 astronauts that we saw up there, had clearly defined roles. And those roles were within their boundaries. So there was no room for the pilot. Can you do this while I do that? And the commander will be issuing command. You do this, you do that, do this. And then he sits back and is drinking a cup of tea. No, there were clear roles for each one of them. And they had to be in those boundaries of those rules. So boundaries is a behavior that we want to always take a good look at. And this is something that we need in our relationships. As humans, we have different forms of relationships. We have our familiar relationships where we have like married couples. We have family relationships. It could be parents and children. It could be between children, siblings. It could be distant relatives and all of that. We also have our romantic relationships between spouses and partners and other forms of relationships. We also have professional relationships with your colleagues, with your bosses at work, with your peers. It could be with your schoolmates and people that you do work with. So all of these relationships, boundaries must exist. without boundaries, we will not be able to have clear definitions of our roles, and people will begin to assume, and we do not want to put assumption to people on how they treat us. Okay? Let me take a sip of my tea. All right. So boundaries. And again, we will come back and talk about boundaries in full. We're just highlighting the things that was possible for these astronauts to also have their mission accomplished. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about is developing mental strength. These astronauts were isolated from every human on Earth. So they were up there by themselves. However, that opportunity presented itself for them to kind of strengthen their mental powers. And imagine being surrounded by space. At least when they started seeing the Earth from that far distance, one of them described it as a jewel. It was beautiful. It was breathtaking. It was awesome. And aside from that, space, nothingness. That is when sometimes people need to strengthen their mental capabilities. Sometimes you could find yourself in isolation. Sometimes you could realize that people are no longer with you. Sometimes you realize you are just alone in this journey of life. Sometimes you also realize that you are walking this journey all by yourself. That is not when you want to reduce your mental strength. You want to find ways to strengthen mental abilities. So, the astronauts were trained and they had that skill to harness mental strength. That was a behavior that they also used. So, mental health, we want to realize that isn't optional. You have to take care of your mental well-being. It's essential. So next time that you feel overwhelmed, you feel stressed, or you are stuck, just remember that if these 4 awesome humans can stay calm and perform under pressure in space, you, my friend, yes, you can handle what's in front of you. We just need to trust in you, trust in your abilities, trust in your strength, because we do have those strengths. We do. Trust in what you can do for you. And most times, it might require that we go back to our drawing boards and see what things we can shift, move, and fix. So, these are the 5 behaviors that saw these wonderful, amazing astronauts up to the moon, around, and back to Earth. If this information helps you, the next you are going to be watching might be on how to stop overthinking, or we might even go the route of boundaries. And we're still going to be using our CBT and DBT tools for those discussions and conversation. I would encourage that you like this video, you subscribe, you share to someone who needs to hear this. And before we actually draw the curtain, I would like you to pause, take that one deep breath with me, exhale, and I want to wish you good health in peace. Thank you.